Hey guys, it's me, Shaw360, and this is a review for episode 3 and 4 of W. And the reason I'm smiling so big is because I'm not the kind of reviewer that does like 2 reviews in one day, but I just got through watching episodes 3 and 4 of W, and I am super impressed. I had to talk about it right away, so that's what's happening. So apparently this is the Matrix. Because, I mean, that's exactly what this is. The comic book world is the fuel for the real world, and they feed off of the agony and the angst that happens in the comic book world. And there's a supreme ruler that's manipulating all the reality that the comic book characters are experiencing. Like, oh, it's just, this drama gives you so much food for thought. It's just, now, don't take this as a dig against Uncontrollably Fond, because really and truly, Uncontrollably Fond and W are 2 different kinds of television shows. It's the difference between Young and the Restless and Law and Order. You know, they're just 2 different types of shows, so it's not fair to compare them to each other. But that being said, no wonder W is kicking ass in ratings. This show, woo! The only reason why I'm not doing 5 and 6 right now is because I'm actually filming this like close to midnight, and I don't want to stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning watching shows and reviewing them. So I'm probably going to watch them tomorrow and then put out that review later. But some of the questions I had from last time were answered, like if Yunju gets shot in the comic book world or killed in the comic book world, will she die in real life? Turns out no, she won't. So that got answered. But yeah, wow. Like, okay, what I thought would be like a central conflict throughout the entire series was, when will the main character from the comic book, Kang Chul, find out that he's in a comic book and that she's a part of the real world? When was he gonna maybe escape the comic book and go into the real world? This is stuff that I didn't anticipate having happen until episodes 12, 13. No, man. No. By the end of episode 4, whole world building things have been revealed. And one thing that this drama does that is so incredibly smart, and it's just so meta. You know, I don't know if you guys read comic books, watch comic book themed movies. If you're just a purveyor of fictional worlds, anybody who loves a creation, I happen to love Harry Potter, anybody who loves a creation will always kind of pick apart the creation to look for places where maybe the logic isn't so sound, or maybe to try to figure out, you know, what the character's motivation is, what could have been done differently, imagining alternate storylines. That's something that people who are fans of a media will do, and that's one of the things that helps the character of Kang Chul actually realize that the truth is that his world is fake. And I think that was so smart of them to use that as a catalyst. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's summarize. Okay, so we left off at episode 2. She had just managed to escape the dressing room in the comic book world and come back to the real world from having kissed and slapped Kang Chul. So she comes back to the real world, and her dad has run off because he's going to end this character once and for all. So he's ran off to a hotel room, he's tried to kill the character, and all of a sudden the character like thwarts death by changing the whole storyline. And the father is freaked the fuck out, because this is not the first or the second time this has happened. Apparently this comic book has had a life of its own since the day his daughter moved out of his house. So this is where we get a little backstory about the creator, which is important because, you know, along with every hero having a backstory, every villain has to have a backstory. So the father, his story starts when his daughter and his wife leave him. And he's in his home, alone, drinking, miserable, probably feeling half suicidal. And he starts to write the death of his main character. And he draws the character actually drowning from jumping off the Han Bridge. But he leaves the room, and when he comes back, the character's hanging off the edge of the bridge, like what we saw in episode 1. The father, because he's a drunk, thinks, well, maybe I did this in my sleep, and I forgot that I did that. And in the end, it actually was a boon for him, because after the character decides not to kill himself, he becomes a rich CEO, and he starts this empire, this broadcast empire, and they finally explained the title of the show. So, we don't find out how it is that Kang Chul becomes this internet billionaire, but he takes his money and he buys a broadcast station, and he decides to form a program where he hires the world's best investigators and detectives to solve crimes. Hopefully they'll get so good at it that they'll be able to solve the crime of who killed his family. Because he's created this program, he becomes the citizen's hero, and people start to forget about the fact that he was once accused of murdering his entire family. And the show is W, which stands for who and why, which those are the central questions we all have for this series. So as things are picking up for the character in the comic book, popularity for the writer in real life is happening, like it's really working out. But there's shades of gray going on, because as he's drinking and drawing and, you know, working on his craft, he's writing storylines, but when he blinks, what he wrote's not there. It's something totally different. And that's when he realizes, this comic book, I'm no longer the sole creator of its destiny. And in a world where that kind of shit's not supposed to happen, I imagine it would freak you out. I imagine you would be afraid to tell anybody that this is happening, because the first thing they would say is, that doesn't happen in this world. Obviously, you're drinking too much. You've gone psychotic. You need to be committed. So the father is dealing with all of these self-made changes and this comic fulfilling its own destiny, and he has no one he can tell. And as it's happening, I'm sure he's thinking, well, what else is being manipulated? If what's going on, if I can't control what's in this comic, is this going to be a scenario that grows? Am I going to find that my world is starting to be manipulated by whatever allows this comic to come to life? And I mean, that's a great question to ask. So I get why the father was working hard to kill off this character, because this is something that he should have been able to control. You know, it would be like you drawing a stick figure on a piece of paper, and when you come back, the bitch starts dancing in front of your eyes. You would think you were crazy, because that's not supposed to happen. But it's happening to the father. So he freaks out, destroys his computer, and runs off to where we don't know. Our lead lady, Yunju, she goes back to work in this dress and heels that she was wearing the day before, and she has a headache, so she takes some headache medicine. And before she took this headache medicine, she had a conversation with Sobung. Now, if you don't know who Sobung is the male kind of assistant to the father, the artist. And he saw the way her dress perfectly matched the manhwa, and how the storyline was kind of weird. And he's starting to believe that Yunju is telling the truth. But she has this conversation with him, and she leaves, and she goes back to the hospital, I guess, to get some stuff. I don't know what she went back to the hospital for, but she goes to the bus stop, I guess, to catch a ride back to maybe her mother's house, because she lives with her mother. Not sure. And while she's on the phone with Subong, she falls asleep. When she wakes up, actually, she falls asleep in the middle of their conversation, and in the middle of the conversation, she reappears. She doesn't wake up. She reappears in the dressing room where she was last at in the comic book. And it just so happened that Yoon Sui, I think is how you pronounce her name. Yoon Sui is at the same fashion house to kind of clean up all of the stuff that happened from the slap and the kiss and going into the dressing room. Like, she's there to do damage control. So she asked him to show the dressing room that the girl went into that no one ever saw her leave. They open the door. There's Yunju lying on the floor. So they contact Kang Chul. He shows up there, realizes she's passed out. And instead of taking her to a hospital or calling the police, he takes her back to his hotel. So he buckles her in the car, takes her upstairs. The police are waiting in his apartment because they want to talk to him about Yunju, because according to their timeline, she's been missing for 2 months, and she is the sole witness to 2 different instances of attempted murder. So, I mean, the charges are pretty stout here. I can see why they're looking for her. Anyway, he carries her into his apartment, lays her out, and he starts asking her questions. And she's answering these questions. This is probably the only weak spot of these 2 episodes. She's drowsy, but she's answering these questions, and she's answering them for quite a long time. And, like, the answers get more and more elaborate, and it's kind of like, girl, if you're really on the edge of passing out, it seems like at this point you wouldn't be talking anymore. You'd be mumbling and then just kind of knocked out. But anyway, she's giving him some answers, but the answers are kind of alluding to the fact that he is being surveilled, that she knows a lot about him because she's seen a lot of his life. So the next day, sorry, I almost skipped over something. So she's passed out in the bed. He's sleeping in the chair, watching over her because she's disappeared on him before. So he's wondering what's going on. Well, he kind of gets startled because he dreams about himself drowning in the Han River. Wakes up and he realizes someone's in his home, and it's the same hooded dark figure who's been after him since the genesis of his comic book. So he kind of leads the guy away from the bedroom because that's where Yunju is. So he's trying to protect her. They get in a fight, and he manages to scare his attacker away, and his attacker actually disappears into thin air, which is crazy, which is why a lot of people who have the theory that the father is the attacker, I could totally see that, because the attacker's vanishing in thin air. So he manages to thwart off danger there. The next morning he leaves, and he leaves Yunju by herself. The bodyguard is there, but I mean, basically she's by herself. So she goes into the bathroom to change clothes, and she realizes there's like this sexy panties in there for her to change into. She's like, oh, I don't know about this. But she goes back into the bedroom to get the gun because she knows that he sleeps with the gun under his pillow. Goes back in the bedroom, gets the gun, goes into the bathroom because she knows that she's going to have to do something to escape from the comic book again. She's not exactly sure how she's going to do it, which is why she's like, okay, maybe I can shock him with my nudity, and if that doesn't work, I have to shock him with this gun. Well, when Kang Chul comes back in the bathroom, she goes ahead and throws open the bathroom like, look at here, big boy. That doesn't cause anything to happen. Next, she points the gun at him, and nothing happens. There's no to be continued. Turns out he had taken the bullets out of the gun, so that's why he wasn't really scared. But then he puts 2 bullets back in the gun and points the gun at her, and he tells her there are a lot of things that you do that are illogical. And so now I want you to answer my questions because I need logical answers. And the first question is, where do you come from? What do you know about my life? Why are you here? How are you able to disappear? Like, questions that anybody would have. And she's kind of giving half answers, but she's not really giving answers. And at first I was like, why isn't she telling the truth? And I realized a couple of reasons why she doesn't give full answers. Number one, she's not giving full answers because maybe she's not even sure how to explain it to him for him to be able to believe these answers, but also because she knows that everything that goes on in this world gets published as a part of the manhwa. So she can't really give the realist answers because people who are reading the comic are not going to know what the hell is going on here. So that's the reason why she kind of is stuck in a standstill. But anyway, in an effort to try to prove his theories right, after he's done threatening with her with a gun, he shoots her. and he shoots her through the heart, like for real, for real. Because remember, he's a sharpshooter, so he knows how to do that shit. Shoots her through the heart, and she doesn't die. Because apparently somehow he knew she wouldn't. But yeah, she passes out because, you know, if you shoot me through the heart and I don't die, I'm probably going to pass out anyway from shock. Put her back in the bed. She wakes up the next day and he's like, listen, I'm sorry I shot you, but, you know, I knew you weren't going to get hurt and I needed to prove that you weren't going to get hurt. And she kind of half-assed accepts his apology because his apology was kind of half-assed. But either way it goes, she and him have a little bit of flirtation as he gets ready to leave, and he's kind of like, you know, you'll be here because I want you here. If I'm in charge of whether you come or go, I don't want you to go, so you'll be here. And of course, you know, all these interactions and this weirdness that's going on between Kang Chul and Yunju, of course, Sui is like, the fuck? Because, you know, probably with the way her character was written, she's harbored some secret romantic feelings for Kang Chul. She sees this other woman coming into the mix, and already this woman has kissed Kang Chul, and he's buying her things, and he's trying to protect her. And then she was also around during these really terrible things that happened to him. So she's suspicious. Well, Kang Chul has to go out of town to take care of some business, and then go out of country to take care of some business. So he entrusts Yunju to Sui and the rest of his bodyguards at the hotel. And while he's out of town, he's talking to the director of his television broadcast saying, you know, there's so many things about my life that don't make any sense. Like, why would somebody murder my family? Why would I go to the rooftop and allow somebody who I don't know make me go to a place where I had no protection, and then I somehow managed to not be able to protect myself against an attacker who tries to stab me? Why would this nurse, who doesn't know me from Adam other than just maybe hearing my name, try to kill me, and there's no links between me and her at all? There's so many logical conclusions that aren't really there. So he's on the way to New York. Him and Yunju talk. Again, she tries to shock him into letting her out of the comic by saying, I love you, which she said that once before at the apartment. And when they get off the phone, he says, if she says it one more time, I actually might feel something. But anyway, he gets off the phone with her. Sui tells Yunju, let's go upstairs and drink some wine. I know you've been tired, you've had a long day. They go upstairs, and Yunju is dressed really nice because the instructions that Kang Chul left to the staff at the hotel is that she's his fiance, and so they've been taking really good care of her. She looks great. But she goes upstairs to the restaurant, and Sui kind of gently extracts herself from the situation. It's a setup. She's set up Yunju to be arrested by the police, and Yunju does get arrested by the police, and she goes through some real like trials and tribulations because she's stuck in this world until it's time for there to be a to be continued. So she gets interrogated, she gets put in prison clothes, you know, she's badgered, she's hounded, and she can't give answers. Number one, because, you know, she doesn't really have any answers. At least the answers that she would give would not make sense in this world because she really doesn't exist in this world. But also, you know, like they ask her what her resident number is. Well, if I have, you know, 1 million people reading my webcomic, I'm probably not going to want to give you my real resident number because, you know, identity theft is a real thing. But yeah, she can't answer any questions they have, which makes her look suspicious. And Sui is trying to push her into telling who she is because she thinks that she's doing this to help Kang Chul. And I totally get that. You know, there might have been a little bit of jealousy, but more than anything, she cares about Kang Chul. This woman comes out of nowhere. Everything about her is strange. She has no answers for anything that's going on with her. She really thinks she's doing him a favor. Unfortunately, not so much. Well, Kang Chul finds out what happened, and the first thing he does is fire Sui, which she's heartbroken about that because, I mean, they've been written to be in this manhwa together for at least the last 7 years. In manhwa time, they've been around each other for 15 years. So for him and her, they have a history. So I'm sure it's heartbreaking for him to be like, you know, you could be my friend, but you can't work for me no more because you don't know how to listen to my instructions. So he comes back to Korea after all of the drama, and he visits Yunju in the detention center, the prison. And when he visits her there, she's broken down. I mean, because even though it's a comic book, time has had to pass in the comic book for them to get to this point. And she's a wreck. She's a wreck. And that's a question. Because you remember in episode 2, when the lead character is not in the frame, time moves like incredibly fast, but it seems like maybe she became the focus of the comic for those panels, and that's why the time moved a little bit slower for her. So she actually felt that 2 weeks, or 4 days, I'm sorry. She felt that 4 days, whereas the last time, 2 months went by in less than a minute. So I just, continuity. Anyway, he visits her at the detention center, and finally she's just had it. He keeps asking her what's going on, so she finally just tells him, this world that you're in is a comic book that I read in my world. And when she says that, it causes her to disappear. And of course, you know, in the comic book world, she's escaped from prison, big headlines, all this other stuff. And of course, our friend, the prosecutor, who was in episodes 1 and 2, who kind of had it out for Kang Chul, was like, now's my big opportunity to help this woman escape from prison. I'm finally going to frame, you know, ha ha ha, evil villain shit. But Kang Chul is really dealing with an existential crisis here. Because it's not just that she said you live in a comic book, but now he's thinking about everything that has happened so far. He thinks about her saying, you know, I've seen all of these important moments in your life, moments when nobody else was around, but I knew what happened, that I want you to have a happy ending. He thinks about the car wreck that should not have happened the way it did, but it did. He's thinking about all of these different things, and he's realizing, holy shit, this is real. My world is fake, and time stops in that moment, and he's walking around as everyone and everything has stopped, and he breaks down, because you can imagine how earth-shattering it would be if everything you ever believed to be real was a lie. It would be like if you woke up tomorrow morning and somebody said, cut, and all of a sudden, all the walls in your home disappeared, and there were strangers staring at you and clapping, saying, great job, buddy. And you're like, what do you mean, great job? Oh, you've been on air for the last 15 years, didn't you know that? Like, that kind of revelation. He's basically Neo. He found out, you know, he took the blue pill and found out that the Matrix is real, exists. You know, he's waking up in the gloopy battery factory. And he sees a square materialize, and the square that materializes apparently is the same square that materialized when he got stabbed on that rooftop, and he pulled Yunju into the comic. So he remembers it, and he decides, I'm going to go through this square, because now I know that there's a world on that other side, and it's a world that Yunju is in, and I'm going to go through it. So he grabs a gun off of one of the prison guards and walks through it. And it happens to be that the one he walks through is the computer screen that they threw out from the father when he had his like fit of craziness. Walks out, emerges on a rooftop. And that's the end of the episode. And I just, wow. They just tackled so much stuff, and I love reality questioning. I think that's one of the smartest things you can do, because in the world that we live in, you know, depending on where you're at in society, a lot of your world is truly manipulated. And I'm not saying it's truly manipulated like, you know, the government's out to get you, hide your kids, aluminum foil your windows. What I mean is like, the prices that we pay, they're all manipulated by corporations. The wages that we get are manipulated by lobbyists who manipulate the government into saying how much people can be paid as a living wage. You know, what we see on television, media companies determine what is news, what isn't news. You know, I live in the United States. Right now, there's a election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Well, Hillary Clinton, it was shown that her win was kind of manipulated because the DNC didn't want Bernie Sanders to get the nomination. With Trump, the media spent so much time talking about all of the outrageous stuff that he did that he ended up overshadowing the other competitors in the GOP race, and he became the nominee for the Republican Party. You know, there's so much about our world that gets manipulated, and it's important as a citizen, no matter where you are, if not to outright question authority, just to kind of think about what's really real in your world. What's really going on? What's your place in it? And if your place in your world is not where you want it to be, where do you want to be in your world? And what do you need to do to get to where you need to be in your world? But I think that's something that everybody should think about. You know, you all should think about kind of, you know, are the thoughts that I'm having or the feelings that I'm feeling, are these my original thoughts and feelings, or am I being manipulated by my friends, my family, my school, my country, my television? And, you know, I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist because I'm really not. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, you know, aliens built the pyramids. I mean, that could be true, but again, that's not who I am. But I definitely feel like all of us should keep a wary eye open, because it's just too easy when you're not if you're not aware and not conscious of kind of the manipulations around you, it's too easy to fall into groupthink. And groupthink is a very dangerous place to be. So yeah, I mean, I got something totally different out of this drama than maybe other people did, but I mean, it really struck a chord in me. It really struck a chord in me, like deep shit, man. Deep shit, man. I just, wow. I was not expecting to feel this kind of thing coming from this drama. This is a shock. But it's an amazing shock, and I can't wait to watch more. I will probably have a review out right after this one for 5 and 6, because I can't wait to watch it, guys. This has been amazing. It's really been amazing. But I will talk to you guys on another review another time. Thanks for watching. Bye.